Good morning.
Good morning.
Kind of every day now, this little music thing we're trying, and that incredibly beautiful background of a police chase down University Avenue leaves me a little discombobulated because it feels funny to be live and not talking. And our situation is all screwed up, setup's funny, you're cut off, there's all this extra couch space. I should have taken some film classes in college. Whatever. How are you? How are you?
I'm good. How are you, lover?
I'm fine too, thank you. I wanted to start with something as a something for you to think about because it was really interesting to me. So yesterday I had a conversation with a man who reached out to me on LinkedIn named Justin Batt, Justin Batt. And he started a program and wrote a book called Daddy Saturday. So he is primarily interested in how to be an intentional dad and raise good kids who become great adults, because he thinks that more than probably anything else going on in our culture, one of the biggest deficits is how few dads are in the picture. 1 in 3 kids lives in a home without their biological dad. My boy certainly did. And then, of course, there are a number of dads living at home who are engaged or disengaged to various degrees. So this Daddy Saturday thing is actually a really great deal. It's basically just how do you create content to do with your children. And I loved it because it's such a positive thing. So it's not coming from a place of you're not doing this. It's coming from a place of let's do this. So he and I were talking about this content, our content yesterday, and he gave me a great thing to think about, which I want to pass on to you if you are the spouse of the addict. Because we've talked about this idea that Dr. Mary would not be listening to this content, would not be watching it with me if I had discovered some other couple doing this. He says that when women read this book, his book, Daddy Saturday, and go to their husbands and say, well, why can't you be more like this? That does not encourage them to be more like that. Because what you're doing is you're shaming them and saying you're not enough. And we've talked a little bit about this idea of judgment, and can you possibly, as the spouse or the partner, can you show up without judgment, which is really hard to do. But is there a way, instead of saying, why can't you get sober? Why can't you be like Maz Mary? Is there a way to find some piece of what Maz says and relate it to your partner or spouse in a positive way? Is there a way to say, boy, I noticed that last week in the morning when you hadn't had a drink yet, you really asked me some nice questions, and I really appreciated that. And it seems like maybe Maz would have something else that you could hold on to, consider, take. I mean, it might be a way to positively affirm for your addict that something they're trying works. So I just wanted to pass that on to you because, again, it's really easy as the spouse to come from a place of criticism. Why can't you be more like? Why don't you just stop? I've asked you 100 times. Why aren't you listening? All those things. You know for yourself that never inspires anybody to try harder when what you do is say, well, I wish you were more like. It never worked with you, and I can look back and say, I tried that a lot with you, thinking, because I operate well under shame, that you would too. So it's just something to consider, and I encourage you to go to daddysaturday.com or justinbatt.com and look his stuff up, because he's just got a great energy. And I think often, of course, what is also true, particularly for parents, is that when addiction becomes the third leg of your stool, the primary leg of your stool, your investment in your children also falls to the wayside. So it's not to add more guilt and more shame to the person's life, but there might be things in that book or in that newsletter or in the podcast or all the things that Justin's doing that might resonate with somebody too. So I just wanted to share that with you all today in the hopes that maybe it would be useful for you. So we're talking about the second promise today.
Mm-hmm.
Yesterday's was, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. And today's is, we are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Back to you, Dr. Mary.
Yeah, that one kind of, it's amazing how quickly that one comes through. If you think about what you're doing as an addict now, there's no real happiness and drunk. You do it to be in need of a drink or anything else. You're doing it because you're on the cusp of despair, and that's how you learn how to get through your current lot in life. When that's taken away, and it's not hey, don't drink, you're going to be fine. There are some hard times ahead of you, and I missed out on the withdrawal because I went into that state in a hospital, so I was put into a medically induced coma. So I just know withdrawal from talking to people, talking to Dana, who was there witnessing it. I don't remember it, but talking to people who lived through theirs, it's not going to be easy. But you are going to know a new happiness, because when that's over and you start to regroup, I can guarantee you that you're going to start thinking more clearly, or you're going to start thinking clearly for the first time in years. One thing that's going to change, and this is true of every addict I've talked to, and I've talked in length about this with both my sponsors, is it's just such a relief. Just, you don't have to lie anymore. I mean, that's just fantastic. Did you do this? No. I was going to do it later. Fair enough. It's not, did you do this? Oh no, I plumb forgot, because I'm actually trying not to pretend I've got a buzz going. I'm trying to function during the day. You're going to have dark moments, I'm not going to lie to you, but you do get a new freedom and a new happiness. And it isn't going to be 3 years down the line or anything. It actually, you'd be surprised how quickly that comes about. It's hard. Sorry, Deb.
It's okay.
I knew
it's all right.
It's hard. It's hard. Some people can't do it, or some people can't do it on the first attempt. But it is doable, and it's also another promise that can go to everyday life. It can go to just anyone who's just feel like they've got too much weight in their shoulders. It certainly can help the significant other of an addict, because those people too will find a new happiness. Even if they don't, if they stay with their significant other and they can work through this together, they both find happiness. Tragically, it might mean, moving away from the addict.
So that, I was going to ask you that. Have you talked to people at AA or in rehab or whatever who have lost relationships that at one point were important to them, who can still say that this promise is true for them?
To a certain extent. I mean, their relationship didn't last for one reason or another, but in themselves, they feel happy. Some of them say, yes, it didn't work with my wife or my husband, but I now have a better relationship with my children. I like my husband or my ex-husband or my ex-wife or my ex-partner. They like me. We are too different, but they're happy I'm sober. And if there are children involved, I've never come across anyone who said that they couldn't make amends with their children. Said it may have taken a few years, but there is a respect that is there now that wasn't. Now, there's different degrees on how successful you can rebuild a relationship, and I've met people in with different degrees of that relationship. Like I said, you and I are actually quite lucky, but
We're astonishingly lucky.
yes, but
I mean, we're just lucky whether you're an addict or not.
yes, well,
You know,
yes, we are now.
yes,
That's
yes.
that's for sure. But it is that degree of freedom and happiness. It is there. It is measurable, no matter how small it is, and that is something that everyone should, I think, grab hold of.
So my second question for you is a science question.
Oh dear. I've only had one coffee this morning.
Okay. You know how they say the challenge to overcoming a meth addiction is that it immediately shifts your serotonin levels, and that you're addicted after a first, I don't know, what do you do, a hit of meth? I don't know. Whatever you do of meth. Does alcohol affect your serotonin levels?
No. There are many drugs that affect your pleasure center, or if you want to be correct, your ventral tangential cortex. And there are different chemical gaps that go between that synapse
Shorter.
There's a chemical signal that fires another signal to your frontal cortex, and that is dependent on the drug that is affecting your pleasure center. So it's different for cocaine, it's different for alcohol, it's different for methamphetamine, it's different for
All of them.
it's different for if you get a rush and a feel-good factor out of gambling.
So is that part of why this shift can happen, not immediately, but sort of quickly? Once you can get the alcohol out of your system, you can immediately start to feel better, because I know that many meth addicts feel worse when it's out of their system, and that's what makes it so hard.
That is actually a good question. It depends on the individual. Everyone's biochemistry is different. Your brain biochemistry is different. So another grasp of how lucky I was is when it was out of my system, I was quite happy with it not being there.
Yeah.
And it, like that whole thing about you find a new happiness and a new serenity. Even if it's small, though, you notice a difference, and that's what you can work on. That's what anyone can work on. You know, if you take a breath and think, all right, this isn't working, let's try this, or that seems to be working. Even if you think, well, that's just the first step, but you do find a new happiness. I promise you.
Do you know anybody who's more miserable sober than they were drunk?
Not if they take their entire life into account and think about everything. When I first got sober, I told Dana I was boring and looked like an accountant.
Sorry, accountants.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong
I
with
think
being an accountant.
my sister is a very successful accountant. I don't know if you've ever been out to a +1 at an accountancy Christmas party, you might know what I'm talking about. Mind you,
Stay on topic, Dr. Mary.
biology, biochemists,
Now that's a
Christmas
hip group.
parties probably.
Yeah.
probably are quite the same.
Anyway.
But you do feel a difference, and it is a positive thing. It's a as they say, it's a tough road that leads to the stars, but you can do it.
You are so Irish
I know.
with your little aphorisms.
Thank
All
you.
right, on that note, I think we'll be done for the day. Check out daddysaturday.com if you have any interest in that. Have a super Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.